So that is the cross-examination of Detective Zachary Sparks. Now, in the direct examination, we heard about some of the items that were found on a list that the prosecution claims was created by Willis. Some of these items sound pretty normal, like a coat. Some of them not so normal, like a ball gag. Sounds like there might be some sort of nefarious purpose behind that. But here, the defense is doing what they're supposed to do, doing a cross-examination, and it seems like the focus is this even Jeffrey Willis's handwriting? I'm going to call in Law and Crime trial analyst Julie Rendelman to tell me what she thinks about all this. Okay, so a coat, sure, you might need that for the winter. Right. Some of these other items on the list, perfectly normal.
Right.
A ball gag? What's the jury thinking right now?
I mean, look, you know, people do have ball gags and don't commit crimes. The problem is that that's not all they have in this case. And so the ball gag by itself is not nefarious, but coupled with the disappearance of this woman, you know, the circumstances of her disappearance and what, you know, is eventually found in the vehicle, I think that the ball gag is representative that this is the guy who is involved in this case, and it starts to give them an idea of potentially what might have happened to this young woman.
Right, and you make a great point. In isolation, any one of these items, these aren't illegal.
I don't have one, but...
Okay, Julie. Well, we don't know. They're not illegal and illicit on their own, but we do know that there were also some kind of shady things found in Willis's van.
Exactly.
This fits in together, right?
It fits in, and it makes it more credible that the note is his versus somebody else's note.
Right, which is the focus of the defense cross-examination. And, of course, the defense is doing their job. That's what they have to do. This isn't his handwriting. Maybe this note belonged to somebody else. We'll see in this testimony the defense also focuses on the fact that many of these items actually could be used for other purposes. Is that effective, you think, Julie?
I don't think so, not in this case, considering kind of the circumstances of what we're talking about. Of course, they need to go someplace because they want to explain it away, but it's hard to kind of ignore that type of evidence when it comes to a young woman being killed.
It's like putting together a puzzle. So right now, before we dive back into the Willis courtroom, we do have to go for a quick break, but we'll be back with more of this compelling testimony in this absolutely chilling. We're in the courtroom of the Jeffrey Willis trial. This is a case where Jeffrey Willis is charged with the murder of gas station attendant Jessica Haringa. Some really just bone-chilling facts in this case that we're watching the prosecutor put together during their case-in-chief while we've been watching clips from earlier in the trial. I'm here with Julie Rendelman, Law and Crime trial analyst. Again, Julie, what we were talking about before, the defense has a job to do, right? So they have to really try and poke holes in the case in any way they can. So with the note that we heard about before, which our viewers are really, just the thought that this is itemized, right? It's just kind of mind-blowing. How many times in a criminal investigation do you find a list of items that someone is planning on using in a crime?
Yeah, except that, you know, there is an argument. Look, I mean, if we... there's an argument to be made that it's meaningless. You know what I mean? You know, and the argument is the body wasn't found, and so there's absolutely no proof that he ever used these items on her. And so that is kind of the defense's job. Unfortunately, as a juror, I think many jurors hear that and immediately have an opinion about who the defendant is in the defendant's chair, and that in and of itself, I think, kind of will get the jury thinking that he is up to something no good, which feeds into the idea of killing this young woman.
Well, Julie, you bring up such a good point, though. No body murder cases. Those are very tough cases to prove because you don't have a cause of death, you don't have a time of death, you don't have a lot of the forensics that show a murder was even committed. So that can be a tough job for a prosecutor.
I agree with you, except in this case, if I remember correctly, this is the one where they have a separate victim that was in the vehicle who was almost in the same circumstances as the woman that we know to be dead at this point. And so I think that helps the prosecution's case awfully much because now they have kind of a jury. In a sense, they can look at the live victim and see what the dead victim went through.
Well, you bring up a great point there, too. I mean, we know that he was previously convicted in another murder in 2017.
But the jury doesn't know that.
Right. Maybe not at this point. Only time will tell as we continue to watch this trial. That we know that there was a 16-year-old who alleges, okay, because he was never convicted in this crime, and in fact, he would be facing trial for this attempted kidnapping of a 16-year-old that escaped, and the jury does hear from her.
Correct.
Again,
Correct.
No conviction.
Right.
But it's a living witness.
And now this is part and parcel of the case. So imagine a jury listening to a young girl who survived being abducted and potentially God knows what would have happened, along with the disappearance of this young woman and all the other evidence that supports it.
Yeah, certainly there is a lot of evidence linking everything together in this case, and that's what we're going to hear from in this clip. This is Ryan Heathius. He's a Secret Service agent. In his testimony here, he's tying together the van, the gun, and other information to link this case to Willis. Take a listen. This is Ryan Heathius in the Jeffrey Willis trial. He is a Secret Service agent, and his testimony is focused on how they narrowed down this particular van. If you remember in the Willis case, there's a grainy video from outside the gas station where Jessica Haringa was allegedly taken. So we have this grainy video. We have a van. This guy's talking about how they're making that identification to ultimately link this case to Willis. I'm here with Julie Rendelman, Law and Crime trial analyst. Now, Julie, okay, all this is great. We know everything's a puzzle in a case like this, right? Sure. All the pieces fit together, prosecution's laying it out. But one thing that the jury will hear is that Willis is already convicted of a murder of another woman, Rebecca Bletch, and that we had the testimony of a 16-year-old, which was really some compelling testimony, heart-wrenching, that she was almost captured by Willis but escaped. Right. Is the jury even listening to anything else?
No. I mean, and we've had discussions about this type of thing in the past, and, the question becomes whether or not the probative value outweighs the prejudicial value. My guess is that any jury who hears that he killed before will immediately assume without question that he killed again. And so, look, I think there's circumstantial evidence in and of itself that was pretty powerful in this case that can convict him anyway. But I guess the prosecutor wants in a sense to have guarantees that they're going to get a guilty verdict. That's my impression.
Yeah, and look, if the judge is going to let the prosecution have that evidence put into the trial, of course they're going to do so. Right now, we have to go to a break, but stick with us. We're going to be breaking down this trial as well as another trial after the break. Thank you, Aaron Keller, for that recap of the Hubers case. This looks like it's going to be a juicy one. One fact to keep in mind, this is a retrial, so there is some information out there in the media. It'll be interesting to see what comes into the courtroom the second time around. Now, we do have some strict rules with the judge. We can only play clips of the witnesses after their entire testimony is complete. So we will be playing witness testimony when we can. An update live from the courtroom, the medical examiner just finished testifying. A lieutenant testified about the crime scene, and jurors were shown the interrogation video of Hubers. An interesting snippet from the medical examiner's testimony was it safe to say that Poston, this is Huber's boyfriend, was alive for each of those 6 shots, and the medical examiner responds, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, yes. So interesting stuff going on in the courtroom. Julie Rendelman, we've been following this case. Unfortunately, we can't sit in there live as it unfolds, but with each witness, we're watching the clips. Let's talk about the opening statements. Now, we've done a little bit of our homework here at Law&Crime, so we kind of knew where the arguments were going to go. What do you make of a retrial? There's always some issues for both sides in a case like this.
Anytime there's a retrial, the issues are, some people think it's better for the defense, some people think it's better for the prosecution. For the defense, obviously, you get a second crack at, obviously not just arguing your case before the jury, but also a crack at interviewing and questioning these witnesses. Along with that, you have what they said before. And so you can use those statements to cross-examine the witnesses. And as we all know, often when people testify or speak about something, they never say things the exact same way they said it before. So obviously, it behooves the defense to be able to cross-examine individuals on the same topics, hoping that they'll come up with different things that are said that can raise some doubts about you know, the guilt or innocence of an individual.
Right. So there's certainly going to be a lot out there, is basically what you're saying, right? So certainly it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. In order to really break this down, let's watch the opening statements of the prosecutors and then review this with Julie, because this is really the roadmap for where the prosecution is going to go with the case. Take a look. She's jealous. She's calculated. She's manipulative. She will go to the ends of the earth to get her own way. This is the prosecutor's opening statement setting forth the theory of her case. Seems like where the prosecutors are going, that there was acrimony in their relationship, that Ryan Poston, the victim in this case, was not abusive. He simply didn't want to be together anymore, and it appears to be that the argument's going to be that she had a deep attachment. This was not mutual, and it's, if I can't have him, no one can. Julie, we just watched the prosecutor's opening. We see where this is going. A lot of focus on these 6 shots, and also the theory that he was not dead on shot 1. This is 6 shots for the purpose of killing him.
Absolutely. Look, even if we accept that the first shot, even if they were to argue that the first shot was out of self-defense, you have to really ask yourself, well, what about the second shot, the third shot, the fourth shot? Because there, even with self-defense, there comes a point when a person is not a threat to you. And by the way, I'm jumping, you know, to even get anyone to believe, quite frankly, and I hate to get ahead of myself, that anyone's going to buy that this was self-defense, because I don't believe at the end it's going to, I think the defense is going to make any headway with that. But even if you were to accept it, I don't know how you explain 6 shots, including what we believe to be several shots while he's on the ground, of which she admits he's on the ground when she continues to shoot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is going to be a lot of interesting testimony in this trial. Now, what we heard the prosecutor just say in this clip we just watched was, I'm not going to tell you what happened. I'm going to let Hubers tell you what happened. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We have clips of Hubers' interrogation video that were played in court today. This is the first time you're going to see them on air. Let's watch them now and see what she has to say about the death of Ryan Poston.
It was so painful to watch him die and to know that I had done that. That I just walked around the table and shot him where I knew he would die immediately and fast. His obsession with guns killed him. You know, I would have never, I'm so Democrat, I would have never touched a gun in my life until I dated him. His big thing was, let's go to the range and go shooting. You know, they're a Republican. His parents made fun of me last night because I was Democrat. You know, a Democrat.
Wow. That is some just absolutely telling statements made by the defendant Hubers in her interrogation video. This was played for the jury today. Just for those of you joining us, some of the statements made in this video: I was watching him die. It was so painful. I walked around and shot him where I knew he would die fast. Julie Rendelman, let's break this down. I mean, this is something to have an interrogation video where you have somebody telling you, the defendant in this case sitting at the defense table saying, I was watching him die, I shot him, and I was watching him die, but it was so painful, I wanted to make sure to just, knock him out.
It's always funny, it's not funny, but when we talk about murder cases, we always say, you know, intent is the operation of a person's mind. We rarely hear them actually say that they intended to kill someone. And here you have someone who specifically is saying, I intended to take his life, and it's rare that you actually hear them say it. You know, it's also quite disturbing to almost feel like she's treating him as though he's an animal, you know, that she's in a sense taking out of his misery, when in a sense she's the one who has placed him in this predicament.
Right, that's, you hear about that if, you know, if somebody hits a deer on the side of the road, exactly. You don't want the animal to suffer, of course. In this situation, taking it a little too far now, Julie, I'm a little confused. Because I thought the defense told us in their opening statement, which we will listen to later, that this was a self-defense case.
Yeah, and I think what they're going to do is, I think they're going to do kind of that sort of self-defense case. I think they're going to try to dirty him up by saying that he was cheating on her and kind of get the jury thinking, oh, we don't like him that much. And so she may have felt vulnerable. And I think they'll couple that with kind of, some type of abuse she had in the past and maybe some verbal abuse now. I don't believe there's injuries to her. We'll see, obviously, if there are, because I don't know that they're going to make out that pure self-defense that we would expect.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to be seeing some information from the past, from their relationship in the nose job murder case. Well, we have to go to a break, but stick with us. More on this case after the break.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. 3 co-founders of popular dating app Tinder filed a lawsuit seeking billions of dollars in damages against Tinder's parent company for allegedly manipulating financial information to undercut Tinder's valuation. The co-founders, Sean Rad, Justin Mateen, and Jonathan Badin, filed the suit in New York Supreme Court accusing parent company IAC Interactive Corp. And its Match Group subsidiary of cooking the books to undervalue Tinder and covering up an incident of sexual harassment involving Match Group's chairman and CEO, Greg Blatt. IAC has denied all allegations in a statement to Law&Crime. The judge who allowed the release of 5 adults arrested in a New Mexico Muslim compound for allegedly training children to conduct armed attacks is coming under fire. District Judge Sarah Backus denied a motion by prosecutors to keep the defendants in custody with no bail, arguing the prosecution failed to meet its burden to show clear and convincing evidence that releasing the defendants would endanger society. 11 children were taken into custody after the compound was raided. The body of a boy was found 3 days later. The 5 adults are charged with multiple counts of child abuse, and all 5 defendants are still in custody. Authorities in Florida have released cell phone video of the moments the son of a sheriff attacked and slashed a local rapper. George Chronister, son of Hillsborough County Sheriff Chad Chronister, can be seen on video attacking the rapper in a Tampa Bay parking lot.
What are you gonna do? He's got his knife out. What the fuck are you gonna do? Nothing. Again.
Chronister faces charges of aggravated battery after his stand your ground defense was rejected. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law&Crime.
Those are today's top crime stories. We want to focus on one that we just heard about out of Santa Fe. So here, the Taos County Courthouse was closed at 3 p.m. Tuesday after a judge who allowed the release of 5 adults arrested who are accused by prosecutors of training children to carry out armed attacks. Now, the court was barraged by telephone, email, social media, threats to the judge, threats to the prosecutors, threats to take her, to get her off the bench. This is all relating to a motion made by the state, which was denied, to keep the compound defendants in jail with no bail. So, Julie, let's talk about this. I mean, this is scary stuff because the courthouse actually had to go on lockdown because of these threats.
Sure, and I think everyone's kind of upset with the judge's decision, and I think it's easy for an outsider to make some calls in regards to whether a judge should or shouldn't be asking for bail or excessive bail. And one of the notes they say is that only if a prosecutor shows by clear and convincing evidence that they are so dangerous, the individual is so dangerous, that no release conditions will reasonably protect the public safety should the judge release them. And in this case, at least the main target we know isn't getting out on bail because he has numerous warrants anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference at the end of the day. But her position is that they didn't make it out, that some of the allegations are simply kind of unsupported comments made by various people. As to whether it will come to fruition, it's unclear at this point, but I think her position was, in a sense, she needs to know more before she can be holding these individuals without any bail.
Right, certainly. The judge has to follow the law, but a very controversial topic, and we'll keep an eye on that story as more continues to unfold. Now we have to switch gears. Back to the Shayna Huber case. Now, this is the nose job murder case. We've been covering this case. We've been in the courtroom. We cannot show witness testimony until the witness has completed their testimony. This is all due to rules in place for the media by the judge. But right now, we have more from that interrogation video that the prosecutor seemed to be really relying on in his opening statement. He said, you know what? We don't need to tell you. Prosecution, state, we don't need to tell you what Shayna Huber did. We'll let her tell you herself. More from this interrogation video. Watch this from court today now. So this is Shayna Huber's police interrogation video, and it seems like there's a lot more concern about finances than there are about the death of her boyfriend at her hands. So this is pretty interesting. Concern about getting money for an attorney, asking if the death penalty, and saying, I don't think people are going to believe me. Julie, let's talk about this video, because this is what the jury saw today. The jury saw this video. You have the person who admittedly fired the gun. Okay, so this is not a case of somebody else did it, saying, I don't really think my story's believable. I mean, what is going on here in this case? Where's the defense going to go from here?
It seems to me, even now, she seems to be more focused and concerned about herself than she is about the fact that she ended the life of someone else. I mean, she talks about, you know, the fact that people should be looking at her character, and, you know, instead of his, and the concerns for herself, which, again, when we look at this, it certainly doesn't bode well. And quite frankly, if she doesn't believe people are going to believe her, then arguably she doesn't even believe that what she's saying is going to be the truth. So it's just... It's a bizarre video, I have to be honest. It's certainly not what you expect to hear from someone who is in such a state of overwhelming sadness for having to kill someone in self-defense.
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly not really feeding into the defense's theory of the case. But let me ask you this. What about a mental health issue? Does this speak to that the defense is trying to say?
I don't know that they're going down the road of mental health to that degree. So I don't think it's enough.
Only time will tell. Well, let's keep going with this interrogation video. Another, I'm going to say it's interesting clip from the interrogation room that the jury saw today in the Hubers case. Take a look. That's the prosecution's closing argument in the Jeffrey Willis case. We see a lot of emphasis and a lot of focus on the identification of that van and linking it to Willis, and also review of that video from the parking lot of the gas station where Haringa was allegedly taken. Now, Julie, we just heard the prosecution's close. Obviously, the prosecution had a lot of let's say a lot to sink their hooks into, right? They had a lot to work with, although still all circumstantial, because we don't have a body, we don't have, we have a gun, but who knows if it's the murder weapon. What did you think about the close?
I thought it was great. Look, I mean, I think that it's the defense that has the uphill battle, and I think the prosecution, you know, if they lose this case, then they did something seriously wrong, because I think the case is absolutely overwhelming as to his guilt, and I think that the fact that it's circumstantial really doesn't in any way impact the jury's ability to find him guilty of the murder of this young woman.
Yeah, you know, look, all the stuff that we heard about, which again, as we talked about, could be fine in isolation, but together a problem. What about that VIX file? To me, that was like teeter-totter.
I think some of the stuff, that's all you need in order to find him guilty. And so it's one on top of the other.
Absolutely. So let's see what happens in this case. We will be reviewing the remainder later in the broadcast. Right now, we have to go to a break, but stick with us. More on the Jeffrey Willis case when we return. If it weren't for all that other stuff, and it were just about Jessica Haringa, would you convict? Well, look, I got to hand it to the defense attorney. He didn't have too much to work with. He had a really pretty tough case. But the problem, that other stuff, is another murder, an attempted kidnapping victim who identified Willis, and some pretty creepy materials, let's say, found in his van. Julie, now, we just heard the defense closing argument. The defense attorney, I will say, he did what he had to do. He did the best that he could, focused on separating the murder which Willis was convicted a year before from the Haringa case, and saying, well, with this evidence, is it still enough? But yeah. Still, what do you think?
I mean, I said to you while we were listening to this that I almost feel sorry for him, because, you know, look, he has to defend his client. He has to do the best he can, but he is up against everything. I mean, to hear him, there's so many ways the prosecutor can go. The prosecutor can remove the death the original victim and still have enough. They could remove the, the victim that survived and still have enough. They could take out both and still have enough. So I think no matter which way he turns, he knows that there's nothing to work with. And so he did the best he could, but I don't think it's going to get him anywhere.
Right. Well, and that's really it, though, because with Haringa, the jury is really asked to look at that, the particular circumstances. It's not proof that Haringa was murdered by Willis because Bletch was murdered by Willis, but certainly they heard about it, and the judge let it in.
Yeah, and we've discussed this before. I think there is a lot of appeal issues that come out of this case because I think that the judge let in an awful lot that I don't know that he needed to, and I question whether this is probative over prejudice because I don't know how the jury can objectively view the evidence without immediately being scarred, in a sense, by what we know he did to Rebecca Bletch.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, look, beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Because that is the prosecutor's burden. Remember, the defense doesn't have to present one witness, one piece of evidence. It really is the prosecutor's burden to show that he killed Jessica Haringa, that Willis killed Jessica Haringa beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, the moment of truth is upon us, ladies and gentlemen. Let's watch the verdict. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Guilty. And now we know that Willis was already serving a sentence for Rebecca Bletch, so does this really change the outcome? Probably not, but certainly it may bring the family of Jessica Haringa some closure, especially since, again, there was no body here. So, Julie, we talked about this before, and I agree with you. I'm a defense attorney, and so I see some of the evidence that was let in. That testimony of the 16-year-old girl, remember, he hasn't been convicted of that crime. Also, the fact that Rebecca Bletch, her murder, was brought up, I mean, that is, to me, the very definition of prejudicial.
I mean, look, anytime you want evidence to come in, it's prejudicial, or you wouldn't want it in as a prosecutor. The question really becomes that issue of, does the probative outweigh it? Now, with the girl that that survived, I believe there's some evidence that links the vehicle to this vehicle, and to the vehicle that we believe was right outside of the gas station. So that might be, that helps to establish why it would be relevant. I think, though, that the judge may have gone a little bit of, afield in terms of allowing in too much information that I think at the end of the day doesn't allow the jury to give a decision about whether he's guilty of this specific murder. We know he's horrible. We know he's killed before, but we want to be able to have a fair and impartial jury that makes the decision based on the evidence. And there are questions. I'm not, without judging, there's questions as to whether it should have come in.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure we'll see those issues on appeal. Of course, in a situation like this where there's a guilty verdict, you're going to have appealable issues. You're going to have the defense trying to see if you can get that overturned. Whether or not it's successful, who knows? What do you think the linchpin for the jury was?
By the way, and it would be impossible because I would name 10 different things. The Bletch murder, the surviving victim, the part of the camera outside of the gas station, the witness. I mean, there's just so much that one can hang their hat on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, notably, Jessica Haringa's mother believes that she might still be alive and didn't attend the trial. So who knows? Anyway, just terrible tragedy for that family. We do have to go to a break, but we'll be back. This is more of Huber's interrogation video, and just some interesting stuff coming out of that. We just heard her say, I feel bad for the family. I want to pull in Julie Rendelman, law and crime trial analyst. Look, we've just watching the interrogation video, but I think more compelling are some of these messages that we just heard in the courtroom. I mean, talk about admissions against interest, right? So tell me about that.
I mean, look, we all say derogatory things about our loved ones, and, God forbid someone should read them and then someone ends up dead. The problem is that these are unusually, aggressive texts with, friends and the dentist. It's just, it almost has an obsessive, jealous quality to each of those things. And then when this comes up and she starts to give the excuse of some type of self-defense, it starts to call it into question.
Yeah, certainly. Somebody might make an off-the-cuff remark about somebody. I'm so mad at them, I want to shoot them. But then when somebody actually gets shot, maybe those messages mean something different, and that's what the jury heard today. Now, we do have some more testimony from the courtroom. This is Lieutenant David Fornash with testimony regarding the investigation. Take a look. Okay, so we are looking at this this case out of Kentucky, the nose job murder case. Allegedly, the prosecutors say that the defendant in this case said, "I'm going to give him the nose job he always wanted," and then shot him in the face. So in this clip, we just Hubers had said she was thrown around like a rag doll, knocked into the bookshelf, which we just saw in that image right there, and the prosecutor's pointing out, or excuse me, the witness on the stand saying, my concern is that there's nothing falling off this shelf. What do you make of that, Julie?
I mean, look, most of her actions seem to support the victim's comments to his friend, saying he was concerned about breaking up with her because he didn't want to upset her and was concerned that he kept trying and wasn't successful in doing it. So to me, all these things, again, I mean, obviously there's more to hear, and I don't want to immediately make an assumption, but so far, I don't think it's boding very well for the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. There are certainly some issues here in this case. On this bookshelf, some of these statements made in text messages, of course, something in writing, that never goes away, right, Julie?
Yes, and that's why we always wonder, you know, is it relevant? How long ago it happened, you know, in terms of how relevant it is to her intent in regards to this murder.
This is going to be quite the case. Make sure to stay tuned with us. We're done for the day, but back with the Hubers case tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. This is Law and Crime.